Welcome to the Right Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Williams, best-selling romance author, book coach, and founder of Serenade Publishing. I've been an avid reader since I could hold a book and have spent over a decade immersed in the world of writing, editing, and publishing fiction. I know firsthand what it takes to turn a love of storytelling into a sustainable, soul-aligned author career. Each week, I share real talk about writing fiction, marketing smarter, and staying inspired, along with up-to-the-date industry insights and strategies that are working right now. You'll also hear from fellow authors, editors, and industry experts who are out there doing the work and making waves. Here, we put the woo in the work of writing, publishing, and growing your author business. Think of this as your creative business pep talk, packed with heart, hustle, and a little bit of magic. So get cozy and join me. Your writing journey starts now. Hi Scribe, Sarah here. Today's episode is a little bit special and a little bit different from our usual episodes because I'm sharing a live conversation recorded at the Sunshine Coast Fiction Festival, an event I had the absolute joy of organising. If you've never heard of the festival before, it's a gathering of passionate fiction writers and readers right here on the Sunshine Coast, where best-selling authors come together to talk about craft, creativity, publishing, and the beautifully chaotic life of being a writer. And let me tell you, the conversations that happen on those stages are pure gold. This particular session was a crowd favourite. It features best-selling paranormal romance author Steffanie Holmes in conversation with best-selling fantasy and rom-com author A.K. Mulford. And the two of them had the audience in stitches from the very beginning. Their chat dives into writing across genres, the reality of building best-selling author careers, creative quirks, and some of the very strange places story ideas can come from. It's witty, honest, a little bit chaotic in the best possible way, and it also includes some fantastic audience Q&A from writers and readers in the room. So if you love hearing authors talk candidly about the writing life, you're going to have a lot of fun with this one. And if listening to this makes you wish you could have been in the room with us, the good news is the Sunshine Coast Fiction Festival is happening again this October. You can find out more and grab your tickets at www.sunshinecoastfictionfestival.com.au. All right, Scribe, let's dive into this live conversation with Steffanie Holmes and A.K. Mulford. Enjoy!
Yeah, we love a wooer. I secretly wish that I could have been a rock star. And so, but if anyone's ever heard me sing in the shower, I cannot, the desire is greater than the talent, let's just say. And so it's always really cool when we come out on stage and people are like, woo, and I'm just like living my rock star dream, you know.
Same. I actually, when one of my kids was 4 and said to me very diplomatically, I could do without the singing. And I've been banned in my house ever since. Very diplomatic for a 4-year-old.
I love it. My husband is not as diplomatic. He always comes into the room and he's holding one of our cats in his arms and he goes, "Oh, Socrates, Mummy is murdering the song."
No. Awesome. Well, we have some fun questions for each other that we've actually stolen from, does anybody know the 36 questions to fall in love? There's like a list of questions that if you ask each other, like with your partner, you're supposed to fall in love with each other. I think it ends with like holding hands and staring deeply into each other's eyes afterwards. But we're not going to do all of that.
Yeah, we're not getting to that. But.
Yeah, we've just stolen a few of those questions. So hopefully you'll fall in love with either us or our characters or our books, because we've changed them a little bit to be more about authoring than us falling in love with each other. Although we do already love each other.
We do.
Awesome. Okay, so the first question. If you could have dinner with 3 of your characters, who would they be?
Oh, I love this question so much.
Dinner party.
I think that, so I have the, so one of my series is called the Grimdale Graveyard series. And it is about, so the heroine goes and lives in this, so she's cat sitting for her parents who own like this big gothic haunted manor house. And she falls for these 3 ghosts. And the 3 ghosts are all from different historical periods. And this was a super fun book for me to write because I trained as an archaeologist, and so I love like anything, you know, anything to do with history. So I kind of chose like 3 of my favorite historical periods, and made these 3 kooky ghost characters. And I would love the 3 ghosts. Who is so that is Pax, who is a very savage but very snuggly Roman warrior. There is Edward, who is a 17th century royal prince, and he's a bit pompous and he's a bit stuck up, but also he thinks he's an incredible poet, and he is not an incredible poet. And then the 3rd character is Ambrose. And Ambrose is a 19th century, he's a Victorian adventurer, and he is completely blind. And he's actually based on a real-life character, real-life person named James Holman, who was a blind man in the Victorian period who circumnavigated the globe on foot by himself. And he was incredible. And so I based Ambrose on him. And I would have Pax, Edward, and Ambrose over for dinner. And, you know, Edward would be reading terrible poetry in the corner, and Ambrose would be talking, like, really excitedly about, oh, that time I had, you know, I had blinis in Moscow or something like that. And Pax would be stabbing things, because that's what he does. And it would be so much fun. So that's my answer. What about you?
I love that. I was thinking about this one, and at first I wanted to pick, like, one from each series, but then I thought, like, what I really like about my friend groups in my books is that each one has kind of a different personality that goes well together, and some of them are very introverted and would not like that I've invited them around to dinner, and they would rather sit in the corner and be reading a book. So I think I'd pick the 3 extroverted main characters from my 5 Crowns of Alcryth series. So that would be Remy, who is in the first book, and then Bree, who is the main character of the 3rd book, and then the last book, which is Karis. And so each one of them, I think, would have good dinner table conversation and would, like, keep the vibes alive. And also, all of them love a good drink and love to play cards. And also, I think, you know, high fantasy characters would be really fun and a good laugh to have around the table. Yeah. All right. Okay. Our second one is a timed answer. And it is to tell our publishing stories in 3 minutes or less.
Okay.
So I'm going to put a timer on, Steph.
Okay.
And get ready for...
I'm ready.
Okay. Wait, how do I do... I don't even know. All right, ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Okay, so I originally trained as an archaeologist, and I went out after my degree and tried to find a job as an archaeologist. And it turns out that nobody wants to employ a blind archaeologist. So I had to kind of look around for something else to do, and it had to be something that no one could tell me that I couldn't do as a blind person. And I immediately thought, well, another thing that I have always wanted to do in my life is write books. So I started writing books, and I spent about 10 years pursuing traditional publishing and getting a lot of rejections. And then basically the Kindle came along, and someone gave me a Kindle, and I was like looking at this, this large print screen that I could make everything large, and I could turn the pages with my nose, and I was like, this is amazing. And so I started self-publishing all of my rejected books onto Kindle. And they sold terribly. And I was writing at the time like very dark, very serious science fiction. And then what happened is I went to a party with some friends, and 50 Shades of Grey had just come out. And I was like a 23-year-old with opinions. And so I was rubbishing this book a little bit, and not fair, but I was. And my friend who had just read it and loved it was getting a bit annoyed with me. And she said, well, it's not like you could write a book like that. Meaning she thought I was a little bit too sweet and innocent to write like a spicy story. And I thought, challenge accepted. So in secret, without telling anyone, not even my husband, I wrote a 30,000 word novella about a fox shapeshifter who fell in love with a museum curator. And I wrote it in 3 weeks. I put it up on Amazon. I paid someone $50 to make a cover.
60 seconds.
Make a cover, and I thought I will put that up, and then it'll sell nothing, and in 6 months' time, I'll tell my friend and we'll have a laugh about it. And then it sold 1,000 copies in a week. And so I had to very sheepishly tell my husband I had actually made some money self-publishing, but not my super serious science fiction. Instead, it was this 30,000 word fox shapeshifter smutfest. And when he finished laughing his ass off, he said, well, are you going to write some more? And I said, well, yes, I am. And that was back in May 2015, and I have since written approximately 50 books. And earlier this year, I had my very first book picked up for traditional publishing, which is my book, Fangs for Nothing.
Woo! Oh,
And that's my story. Did I make it?
5 seconds left. Wow. Well done. All right.
Okay, Ellie's turn.
I'm resetting the clock. Oh no, I have too much golden retriever energy for this. Okay. All right, here I go. And I'm off. All right. So I've been writing my whole life. I was that kid who filled notebooks and notebooks full of stories. And as I was growing up, my mom worked in an independent bookshop and would always tell me, one day it's going to be your books on the shelf. And I said, yeah, right, that's not a real job. I can't do that. So few people can make a career in the arts. I'm going to go into the sciences. And so I became a wildlife biologist and lived in many different countries and many different continents. And the whole time was still writing stories, both for me and the people who lived at the wildlife sanctuaries I was working at. And we were all just so desperate for books. If anybody brought a book, this was before Kindle, so take a book, leave a bookshelf. And still writing stories the whole time. And then it wasn't until I had my first child that it was the pandemic. I was at home with this kid, and I thought, maybe I'll give self-publishing a go. I really want to put these stories out into the world. I have 2 minutes. So I begged my partner, trying to convince him that it was a good idea to get a new laptop because my laptop was really old and broken, and that was a really big purchase for us at the time. And I was like, I swear I'm going to use it and I'm going to do something with it. And he said, it's cheaper than therapy, go trying to convince him. And so I got a laptop on my birthday, and I published my first book, The High Mountain Court, 8 months later. And within the first 6 months of publishing that book, I had sold 100,000 copies. And then now I've hybrid publishing, so I have both traditionally published books. That series is now picked up by Harper Voyager, and I have another series coming out with them soon. The first book is a dark sapphic fantasy called Dreamslayer that's coming out next year, about a dream that falls in love with a nightmare that I'm very excited about. And I also started a second pen name where I self-published as Allie K. Mulford, very, very different name. I was really creative between AK and Allie K. And I write rom-coms and more cozy books under that. And I've just celebrated publishing my 30th book last Tuesday. Yeah, so that's me, with 10 seconds left. That's really hard.
It's so hard.
I'm like, what anecdotes do I leave? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I had 10 seconds, so I'll say this another 10 seconds. But the day my first book came out, my mom took a photo of it on the shelf of that bookstore that she used to work at and sent it to me and said, I told you so. So, yeah. All right. Ooh, okay, I love this one. Do you have a secret hunch about how you will die?
I do.
We're both spooky people.
Yeah,
we can handle this.
Yeah, yeah. I think we've got this one. So, as you may know, I'm quite blind, and I'm also very, very uncoordinated. They do kind of go hand in hand, and so I suspect, or maybe I just really hope, I would love like one of those kind of like Darwin Award deaths where I just like walk off something really, really high. That is my suspicion.
I love that. I, for a long time, suspected it would be animal related because of my previous job, and I've nearly been killed many times by many different kinds of animals, both like venomous ones and just very large ones. And so I always thought I would end up being like eaten by something. Although now, you never know. Like, it could still happen, but I don't live in the jungle anymore, so.
You do live in Australia.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Something could still get me. Watch, oh no, it's going to be in the news like a shark or something. And I'll be like, I told you. I called it. But yeah, either that or something falling. I would like to request falling to death. But that might just be like my dreams, those falling dreams. So I don't know.
That's really interesting, actually. Do you have a lot of falling dreams?
I do. I've never had one of I've been thinking obviously a lot about dreams and nightmares because I'm writing a series where there's a dream realm and a nightmare realm, and it's very dark and twisty. And I've never had like one of the teeth dreams that people talk about. I have a lot of one of my characters in this new series is called Hush, and of the voiceless clan, and their people are all the people who, when you're trying to scream in a dream and you can't speak and you're losing your voice. I get a lot of those sorts of dreams, and falling and flying I get a lot as well. How about you?
I get a lot of flying dreams, but one of my greatest desires in the world is to fly. And the very first job I wished I could have was I wanted to be a World War I flying ace, like my hero Snoopy.
Cool.
And I never really grew out of it. And I have done a lot of crazy things in my life. I've driven a train. I've driven a car. I drove a jet boat, which was hilarious. But that's a whole other story. The poor guy who rented the jet boat to me, and my friends are on the shore watching me, and he's there watching me do this. There's an obstacle course, and I can't see it, so I'm just like, and he's standing there. He's watching this crazy girl just go nuts on this jet boat, and he's like, God, it's like she's blind or something. And my friend's like, yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? So I have a lot of I have a weird thing where I am very good at lucid dreaming. So very often when I have nightmares or basically anything, if I realize I'm dreaming, which is very, very common, I just go, do you know what? Fuck it. I just want to fly. And I'll just drop everything in the dream and just fly. And that's what a lot of my dreams are.
Have you ever had any dreams get into a book? Like anything you've dreamt ever shown up in anything you've written?
Oh, no, I do. So I keep a pad and pen beside my, beside my bed. So if you think of something in the middle of the night, you wake up and write it down. But it turns out that dream ideas, and you wake up and you're like, oh my God, this is genius. And you write it down, and you look at it in the morning, and you're like, no.
Yes.
Yeah, I had one the other month, and I'm like, I had this creepy as dream about some kind of there was gardening involved. And I woke up and I wrote this thing down. I'm like, this is genius. And I went in the morning to look at it, and the only thing it said was tulips equal death.
I had a very similar one recently where it said, using your own bones as weapons, ? And I'm like, I don't know, but that's cool, man. I don't know what that's about.
I love the work the question mark is doing in that sentence.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
We could figure that out. But yeah, I've definitely had anxiety dreams and things that I've put into the books as really intense moments. Like in my very first book, The High Mountain Court, there's a moment where they're running down the mountain trying to get to like an antidote in time after being poisoned. And that was 100% based on a real thing of this feeling of like, we're not going to get there in time, and run faster. And then all of a sudden your legs stop working and you're running slower, and you know, that feeling. And yeah, I have a lot of anxiety dreams, and I'm like, oh, well, it's good fodder for books. So, you know, I'll just chuck that in there. Yeah. All right. Name 3 things we have in common.
Oh, I suggested this question, and now I'm drawing a blank. No.
Well, one is so I'm a Kiwi, despite my accent, and that's how we originally met, because I lived in Wellington for most of my adult life. So we're both officially Kiwis, despite the way that I say my A's and R's.
I guess we could say this is very like, this is between friends. So Ellie and I both came from lines of work which involved a lot of field work, and basically field work means being grumpy and dirty and miserable for extended periods of time. Yeah. And we're now authors, and we're now quite successful. And we laughing about this over dinner the other night. We're like, I used to like bathe in a wheelbarrow. With like a curtain around it on archaeological digs. And now I'm like, what if I can't fly business class?
What happened to us? I think but we really appreciate it, because we've both like just lived in the middle of nowhere and not had electricity and not had hot water, and I think you and I are both also good at sharing absolutely crazy stories around a dinner table because of all of those lines of work. And I think too, authors often you find have backgrounds in all sorts of different things, not always in just creative writing, but like all sorts of different careers, because that we just love collecting stories, and we love collecting people and personalities in different places in the world. And so I think that you can always tell if somebody might have like it in their heart to write a story if you're telling them something and they're like, oh, that's interesting, tell me more, like I want to know a little bit more about that. Yeah. Okay, I think that's 3 things. Yeah, lots of things. Yeah. Also, we love a good cocktail.
Very, very. It's a quick way to our hearts.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You will often find us at events and conferences, wherever good cocktails are. All right. Oh, I love this one. Share a positive characteristic about the other. I have too many, and I'm trying to whittle down, because you have so many positive characteristics.
She's too sweet.
No, but it's true. But I think the one that I would say is one of my favorite things about you is that you are such a wonderful people connector. You build communities wherever you go. You have this like really warm, connecting personality. And it's just one of my favorite things about you is you just have this real shiny energy that everyone is drawn to, and you invite people in to be a part of it, that I really appreciate. I was one of those people that was like a moth to the flame, and now we're mates, and it's just really nice that like wherever we go, if there's somebody who's like new or a new author or something, you'll be like, come join us, like let's go have lunch and stuff, and that's just a really beautiful quality. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's also slightly inspired by my love of going out for cocktails.
Yeah.
No, again, there's so many incredible qualities about Ellie, and it is so hard to choose just one. But I think I really am so drawn to Ellie's empathy, and it's one of the reasons why I love her books so much, because they just have such an incredible kind of quality of being able to see the world through other people's eyes and kind of understand where people with different points of view are coming from, and being able to kind of collect that into an experience that feels so, when you are in Ellie's orbit, you just feel like you have been, you've been friends for decades instead of like just meeting, and you just have such an incredible empathy, and I'm so honored. I'm so honored to have you as a friend.
Me too. We're terrible at receiving this kind of praise.
Yeah. This was a bad idea.
I know. As you were talking, I was like, oh no, what have we done? That is one thing I think that authors we struggle with, right? Like we always love bathing in criticism, don't we? We're always like, yes, that's to be expected. You hated my book. Okay, cool. But when people come and tell you what it means to you, you're like, oh, well, they were just being nice. They didn't, it's hard. And advice I give to new authors a lot is that you're kind of disrespecting your reader by not believing them when they tell you that they value your story. And when somebody reframed that for me, it made it a lot easier for me to accept the kind things that people say, because I think a lot of us are just naturally self-deprecating and feel much more comfortable putting ourselves down than like allowing people to be kind to us, So, yeah.
Yeah, it took me a very long time when people would give me a compliment to be able to accept it. I had to work so hard to just be able to say thank you, like really sincerely, instead of like, oh, but the same to you, you too, or something. No, that's not true.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Isn't that what we're kind of like trained to do? I think especially like women, we're almost like trained to like push it away, right? And not be able to, like, I remember even being a kid and someone said like, oh, like that's so incredible, like you're really smart, and I said thank you, and she was like, oh, well, usually you're supposed to say like, no, you're not, like da da da, and I was like, oh, well, I believed you. You said this thing. So I think like it's one of those things. There's certain things of being an author that I feel like are very unique headspaces to be in too. Like one thing I realized, and as a neurodivergent person, is that I often kind of catalog people's facial expressions to understand what they're trying to convey, like happy, sad, things like that. But one thing I've never cataloged before being an author is like nervous to meet you face, because it looks a lot like anger. And so I'm always like, man, that person really hated me. And then I'll get a message the next day being like, oh my God, I was so excited to meet you. And I was like, oh no, we just lived through a very different 10-minute conversation. I was not prepared for that, Are there any things for you, Steph, that have been like surprising things as part of being an author? Like things that you, in hindsight, would go back and tell yourself to be prepared for that you hadn't expected?
This is going to sound really weird, but I sort of didn't expect all of you. What I mean by that is when I spent 10 years writing books before I even published anything, or published a novel, and then I spent several years publishing novels, just writing, publishing, before I really met in person a single person who had read anything that I'd written. And so I knew that I was selling books, and I knew that there was reviews online, and some of them were wonderful and some of them were sad. But I didn't really articulate that behind all of that were readers, and that readers were are just like me, And when I was growing up, and I was being bullied horrifically because of my wobbly eyes, books were like my lifeline. They were my friends. And so to kind of to know that you guys were out there reading my books, and that you found such that they were a lifeline for other people the way they had been for me, like that just blew me away. And the very first event like this I did, I was like, I didn't know you existed. I academically knew, but I didn't actually know. And that was a real surprise to me. And now I do as many events like this as I can, because I just love meeting you all.
Yes, 1,000,000%. Yes, clap. I 1,000,000% agree. Like, and for me, both readers and authors too, like when I started writing my first book, I told one person and they were like, so it's like Lord of the Rings, but with kissing. Like, I don't, I don't really get. They're like, okay, good luck, have fun. And it wasn't until I was at the time. It was during lockdowns. I had 2 little kids, couldn't leave the house, and had a child who I couldn't leave with anyone else, and I felt very kind of like alone and isolated. I wrote my first 3 books between like 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. before the kids woke up. So like the first few series, that was the only time I had. And then I got on TikTok and found Book Talk. And it was like, here are my people, like there's actually people out there who want to talk about these things and like get really excited. And I feel like the book community is like an instant in, you can instantly find friends and that it's just so special when a lot of us grew up feeling like we didn't have anybody maybe in our small town we grew up in to connect with, that we can find each other and have events like this that we can get together and nerd out about stories together. Yeah. All right. Well, those are our main questions. We it's 2:30, so we could ask a few more of each other, or we could put it to other people to ask questions.
So I think let's put it to other people, and if we can always come back to our question.
Yeah,
list.
we might just have a little bit of a chat or a yarn. As when I first moved to New Zealand, I was like, a yarn, because I didn't understand, and I was like unraveling a piece of yarn, or like your yawn like tired, and now I say all those things even with my silly accent. Yeah. But yes, should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Does anybody have any questions for either of us?
Hello. So you mentioned obviously you both had careers prior to being authors, which is much different. If you had a chance to just jump into some alternate reality and live some other career, life path, everything, what would that be?
Pilot. Who moonlighted as a museum curator for mummies and also sung in a heavy metal band.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I feel like classic chaotic ADHD, chaos gremlin. I've had a lot of jobs in my life and I've hopped between them really quickly. And this is the first job I've ever had where I'm like, I don't want to do anything else. There's nothing else that I'm thinking, oh, maybe I could pivot into some other thing. But I did always have a dream. Well, I've always had a dream of having a hobby farm and just rescuing a bunch of sad farm animals that nobody else wanted, and just having this really cute little one-winged chickens and things like that, just on my little wonky hobby farm.
Maybe some judgmental donkeys?
Yes. Oh gosh. Oh no. I told that story last night. If you want to know that story, it's also in She's a Keeper, which is my first zookeeper rom-com, and is 100% true, unfortunately. But probably not appropriate for this room.
Possibly not.
Yeah.
So I actually have a hobby farm.
Yes.
Yeah. So
living my dream.
Yeah. It is not quite what it was cracked up to be.
Yeah.
I mean, most of it is amazing. You go down, you feed your sheep, and you're like, oh yeah, look at me. And then just a lot of it is, sheep are dicks.
They are, yes.
If anyone follows me on Threads, I have kind of a an ongoing sort of series, which is just things that my husband yells at the sheep when they escape, and it's quite hilarious. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work, and sometimes you just think, gosh, I really wish I didn't have to weed a whole paddock. I'd just rather write a book.
Yeah, I always was I'm either going to work with animals or write books. Those were my 2 main passions, and I spent my 20s working with animals. And now every once in a while I'm oh, I could get my wildlife rehabilitator's license renewed, and we could have like a few bats in a like laundry basket in our, you know, like I think we could do that. Might be something that happens in the future again, because I do miss, you know, despite the sleep deprivation, like waking up and crop feeding parrots and things like that, you know, and all the but then you get to release them back into the wild. You don't have to do it every day ongoing, you know, so that's one of the benefits of wildlife rehabilitation.
True. I do think one of the cool things about being an author is that because look, I've written 50-some books and Ellie's written 30-some. And whenever you write a new book and you write new characters, you get to kind of try on different hats. And you have to do certainly some amount of research. And, so you get to kind of, for a little while, you get to kind of live in like a different world and like experience a different career. But you don't have to go to school to do it, and you don't have to fly a plane while blind. And like it's, I think I really love that part of being an author, because anytime I have like a really deep interest in something, or like, learning about something new, I get to go and do it, and then I stick it in a book. But then at the end of that book, I get to go and learn about something different. Yeah. So I am writing a book at the moment. It's book 3 of the Nevermore Murder Club and Smutty Book Coven series, and the heroine is a pilot. And so I am learning a lot about. No one's let me fly a helicopter yet, but I am learning a lot about being a helicopter pilot and like search and rescue techniques and stuff like that. But I've done a lot of series with a lot of different jobs, which are literally just things I would love to do for like a month.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun part of being a writer as well.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, we get to live 1,000 lives. Yeah. Sorry, what's your question?
Hi. So do either of you kind of pull from any authors, or do you have inspiration that you see day to day to help create your next story? Like, what is your kind of plan when you're writing a story or something? Do you start with your plots or your character, or do you read something that's gone, oh, I like that, I could change it into my way?
Oh, I love that question. I feel like for me, if you're familiar with the Clifton strengths, I'm number 1 input. So I love collecting stories in all different forms, not even just books, but like movies and TV shows and Dungeons and Dragons campaigns and all sorts of different things. And I'm constantly thinking about like, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, that's like a cool thing. And I think even just like I have a note on my phone that is just interesting words and turns of phrases and things, just like because I like collecting them. But for me, usually the ideas for books will usually start from like 1 or 2 what I call pillar scenes. Like they're moments that I just know are kind of almost like the thesis statement of the book, like this is what the book's about. This is the theme. This one moment between these 2 characters when they finally like connect. And from there, I kind of start building out the world more and more from there. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. So I guess it's quite an interesting question, because I've literally written a series which is very directly inspired by my love of like classic literature. So I have the Nevermore Bookshop series, which is a Why Choose romance, and the heroine who is going blind gets a job in this magical bookshop. And the magical bookshop brings infamous fictional villains from classic literature to life in the real world. And so for that series, it was literally, the idea that I had was, this bookshop, these villains, pick 3 of my favorite, like classic literature kind of novels and worlds, and, build out those characters in like a modern setting. And so I had, there's Grumpy Heathcliff, and there's Moriarty, the criminal genius, and there's Quoth, the raven from Edgar Allan Poe. And so that was like a very literal, yes, definitely, absolutely inspired by, the books that I read and love. Like Ellie, I am also a collector, and you'll find a lot of writers are like this, and we're like ravens basically. We look at the world and we're like, oh shiny, oh shiny, yes. Oh shiny, and we get. I think Ellie's the same. I get really obsessed about some specific subject, and I will go on a big kind of learning spree about that subject for a little while, and then I'll collect all of this kind of ephemera. about that particular subject. You know, at the moment, I'm very obsessed with like art fraud, and you know, the Louvre heist. So I'm learning a lot about like art fraud and art theft, which like come and talk to me later. It's so fascinating. And you know, the month before, it was all about mushrooms, and you know, it's been a wild year. Totally. So, you know, we collect all these different things, and they kind of just percolate up here. And I never collect anything with the specific goal of putting it in a book, but I just collect things that I'm interested in. And then some spark comes along, and suddenly all these kind of disparate pieces kind of fall into place. And I'll tell you this one. So I have my book, Fangs for Nothing. And the reason how this book came to be was that my husband was trying to convince me that we need to build an extension on our house. And the reason we need to build this extension is because he wants to build an indoor train set. Now, the indoor train set cannot go in his music room because it is filled with a drum kit and a bunch of instruments. Cannot go in his office because that has a smaller train set. It cannot go in the workshop because that is filled with his tools and his machining equipment. It cannot go in our bedroom because that has my pole for my pole dancing. It cannot go in the living room because the living room is currently covered in textbooks about Egyptian hieroglyphs because that's what I'm doing at the moment. And so we are having a laugh about how we, you know, two grown adults have like filled our house with hobbies. And we're joking about how if, you know, it's a good thing that neither of us are vampires, because if we had 500 years, this place would be like, you couldn't move. And that just suddenly, that concept just boom. And then the character of Alaric in Fangs for Nothing was born. And Fangs for Nothing, if you haven't read it, is about this vampire. He's grumpy, he's reclusive, he's hot, because of course. And he lives in this, he's 500 years old, and he lives in this remote castle, and he spent the last 500 years pursuing every imaginable hobby you could possibly think of. He even has a train set. And the problem is, you know, he's filled this castle to the absolute brim, but the problem is that his mother is coming to visit. And so he hires Winnie, who is a sunshiny, human professional organizer, to come in and declutter his castle. And then, of course, they fall in love, and shenanigans ensue. And, you know, that is, you know, this book, you know, it pulls from a lot of areas that I'm interested in. So, you know, a lot of the hobbies that Alaric does, you know, are things that I've tried in the past. We have a real interest in sort of medieval history, so I pulled a lot of that in for the castle and, Alaric's like history as a vampire, and it's just pulling from all these, this tapestry of ideas that have kind of been percolating, but that spark was literally my husband saying it's a good thing we're not vampires because we would have filled this house.
It's so good. I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy of Fangs for Nothing, and I was like, I feel too seen in this book and by this vampire, because I have like a doom closet of abandoned hobbies. Like, I'll watch a few videos on knitting and be like, this is the next thing. This is the rest of my life I'm going to be a knitter, and I know way too much about different kinds of fabrics, and I'm like, well, then we should get some sheep and we could spin wool, and I could, you know, and it turns into this whole grandiose idea, and then I'm like, dude, I have the needle with 3 lines of knitting on it. And I was like, yep, I'm done. I'm on to the next thing. But talk about same. Like, my latest thing has been reviews of Korean 7-Elevens and the food that they have in there. Right? Okay, it's so good. Also, I really love watching medieval historians critique movies on siege warfare.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Do you have a favorite siege engine?
Well, you know, okay. Have you seen the one where they talk about the importance of trenches?
Yes.
And I'm like, they never put trenches in. They're always rolling things right up to the castle walls. And it's like, because it doesn't look cool and dramatic on screen, so they always have like fire everywhere. They would never have that much fire, you know? But they're like, actually digging a ditch is way more effective to stopping people from sieging your castle. And I'm like, oh, that's or things like arrows. And how they're always sticking out of people, but quite often at the velocity they're going, they would go right through a person. And stuff like that, I'm just like, oh, this is fascinating. So I love collecting information like that. But I do think a lot of the inspiration for my books, even my fantasy books, comes from my own life and like my own relationships with people and things like that. But, you know, places I've lived in a lot of different countries, a lot of different continents. And so like when I was writing The Five Crowns of Alcryth, each court was like a different country that I'd lived in. And so I hoped that it felt that way, that like the scents were different and the textures were different and the foods were different. And even like just people's senses of humor were different, and culturally like the things that they valued and thought were important were different. And so, for me, I wanted to like build that. And then I really love world building based on kind of places I've lived around the world. But one of my favorite stories was in Pumpkin Spice and Poltergeist, which is kind of based a little on like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, because I grew up in a really tiny town in Connecticut that was like our neighboring town, which is slightly bigger. It does the Gilmore Girls reunion every year. So we had, you know, like the small town cast of characters, and like everybody knew you, and they would all like ring your parents if they saw you like out after the streetlights were on, or, you know, things like that. And so really wanted to create like that kind of feeling of, you know, going to the orchard and the apple picking and all of these things that, like, you know, especially that autumnal kind of time of year that is so special in New England. And so that was really fun, kind of creating that vibe. And in fact, there's an orchard in the town. This is a co-authored series. And the town that we would always go to, the orchard, was called Bishop's Orchard. And it's the only one named that, I think, in the entire US. Like, if you Google it, it's the only one that comes up. And my co-author never knew this. And she named all the places in the town. And so when I got the map, the orchard was named Bishop's Orchard. And I was like, how did you know that that was like where we would go? And they had an old like mill press that would like mull the apples and stuff like that. And I just thought that was so wild. We had like one of those moments where we just must have like cosmically synced in some way. So yeah, but yeah, I love all of the places I've lived informing the kind of worlds that I build. Yeah.
One more question.
Hi. I was just wondering, I didn't want to say the word writer's block, but I've said it now. I didn't want to manifest that into the universe. But what is your guys' process for when you hit a point, like you know how you want your story to end, it's there, it's written, and you get like 30 chapters in and you're like, ... and you just don't know what your next step is. You don't know how to get there. That's what I'm curious what your process is for like resetting, I guess.
So, so for me, so this could be like a whole workshop.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
You've asked a doozy. So the sort of the general thing that we talk about is most writers are somewhere on a spectrum. I mean, we're all somewhere on a spectrum, but you know, this is another spectrum. So this is a spectrum of plotting to what we call pantsing, which means writing by the seat of your pants. I prefer architect to gardener, but they're the same terms. So some people down this end, they need like a 10,000 word, 20,000 word outline, very detailed outline of everything that happens in every single scene of the book before they start writing. And people down here, they don't even want to put like a line on the page before they start. And the kind of the vibe down here is that if I know what I'm going to write before I write it, then it's not fun anymore. So I feel like I'm done. So I don't do it. And depending on where you are, is going to be kind of where what's going to work. I am very close to this end. And the thing is that we're all doing the exact same thing all of us down here are doing an outline, effectively, but we do it at a different time and we do it in a different way. Most of us are holding that in our head. We've kind of got the vibes. And so what I do is I write like a very quick, like 10,000 word, what I call a skeleton draft of the book. So I just like really quickly start writing, and over like 3 days I write down all of the scenes that are in my head. And for each scene that I do, I ask myself, what would the character, knowing everything I now know about the character, what would they do next? And when I get stuck, it's usually because I am trying to force the character to do something for the plot that is not actually true to themselves. And so I usually just need to go back about 1 or 2 scenes and just keep asking myself that question, knowing what I know about them, what would they actually do now? Not what do they have to do for the plot, but what would they actually do? And that's usually solving the problem. And then the second thing is that, it's kind of the same thing, but you've got like point A and you've got point C, but you don't know what B is. And so it becomes, this kind of often just skip B and just jam those two together and you're probably going to be fine. But usually another thing to do is if you are stuck, is to just skip the bit that you're stuck and just go to the next, what Ali calls like a pillar scene, the next scene that you have in your head, and just write that. And just, you don't have to write in order. It's fine. It's all chaos. That's mine.
For me, I find it's either not knowing what comes next, but often I can always make something up pretty quickly. For me, it's more the executive dysfunction side, where there's a disconnect between like my brain and my fingers, and so it's the motivation to like get to the keyboard, sit down, and be willing to write. And if anybody's neurodivergent here or finds neurodivergent hacks helpful, I have a YouTube channel where I do a lot talking about this, and one is hacks for hitting the end. And there's lots of different things, like little motivation dopamine boosts, but I think the biggest thing is becoming more comfortable with being okay writing poorly until you get back into flow. I think that's the thing that stops us, because a lot of us, the image in our head is the final product. And so we're comparing the first iteration, the first draft, to this beautiful image we have in our heads. And we know we can go back and make it beautiful later. But it's really hard to muddle through when you're like, this sounds clunky, it sounds wrong. I know I can fix it later, but it doesn't feel right now. And it's sometimes really demotivating, and then we just kind of give up, and then we've kind of psyched ourselves up for it, so then it's even harder the next time to like show up and get that writing done. So so lots of the same tools I find for motivation with ADHD I find really helpful for when I'm feeling like demotivated or stuck. And actually, I put on every quarter a writing challenge, a 3-day writing challenge, where it's next weekend, called the 3-Day 30K, and it has lots of like really fun little dopamine hit things. Like we have a quest map where, like you can say like you get stuck in the sloppy word swamp and, things like that. And it's just really fun. And sometimes you just need a group of friends to cheer you on and like be like, go on, it's okay if it's not perfect. Just get the words out, like get that scaffolding out. And once it's on the page, then you can fix it and make it beautiful. So it's like, I think sometimes one of the hardest things as an author is knowing when to push and when to pull back. It's like, if I grind more, is it just going to make it worse? Or do I need to just push through to the next bit of flow? So like sometimes I know I do need to take a break. I need to like go for a walk and listen to music and go for a drive and have a shower and have some brainstorming time and do some self-care, and then I'm ready to go again. Sometimes I'll even trick myself by like putting myself in writing timeout, where I'm like not allowed to write for 5 days. And then of course I'm so stubborn that I'm like, oh, well, I do want to write, and so I start brainstorming about all the things I'm gonna write as soon as I'm allowed to. And actually this writing challenge we're doing next week, and I'm working on Dreamslayer book 2, and I've been just like itching to write it and not allowing myself to. So I'm really excited when I get to sit down and actually do it. So yeah, looking at all those little hacks, I like to almost, I call it having a toolkit, because I feel like with every book, like each book is its own stubborn child, you know, and you need a different tool and a different assembly of toolkit items to be able to finish that book. And also with every year of your life, your hurdles and obstacles are different as well. So like the tools that and strategies that worked for you one year, oh, I have a Band-Aid on my knee. Where does that come from? That classic ADHD moment. Just like, where did that come from? Just in case you were wondering if I was joking about having ADHD. But yes, like each phase of your life, you're going to have different hurdles. And so having different strategies ready to go, and that safety net of assurance that like, okay, that didn't work, I'll try a different strategy. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for all of your questions.
Thanks so much for listening to the Right Podcast with Sarah Williams. If you enjoyed today's episode, it would mean the world if you'd leave a review and share the show with your writer friends. It helps more creatives find their way to us. And don't forget to follow Serenade Publishing on Instagram and TikTok for more writing tips, publishing advice, and exciting events to keep you inspired. Keep writing, keep dreaming, and know that I'm here to support you every word of the way.